The night Elias Ward remembered for the rest of his life began without warning. The kind that slips in quietly and then refuses to let go. The sun had dropped behind the jagged hills, leaving his small farm wrapped in a cold, uneasy silence. Elias had lived alone for years on the far edge of the frontier, where the land thinned into Apache territory and neighbors were nothing but rumors carried by the wind. He was mending a broken hinge on his cabin door when he felt it, that heavy pressure in the air that told him he was no longer alone. The fire behind him crackled and 3 shapes stepped into its glow. They were women, but unlike any Elias had ever seen. Each of them stood taller than most men he knew. Their bodies powerful and broad, built by hard miles and harder battles. Their dark hair was braided tight, their faces marked with dust, blood, and faded paint. They did not rush him. They did not shout. They simply stood there, unmoving as if the land itself had risen to block his path. Elias's hand drifted toward his rifle without thinking, but the tallest of the 3 lifted her palm, not in fear, not in surrender, but in command. Her eyes locked onto his, sharp and steady, carrying no panic, no softness. When she spoke, her English was broken, but clear enough to strike him like a blow. "You will sleep with me tonight." The words froze him where he stood. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure they could hear it. For a brief, foolish moment, his mind raced toward fear and misunderstanding, but something in her tone stopped him. There was no invitation there, no desire, only urgency, heavy and immovable as stone. Before Elias could answer, a low growl rolled across the hills. Wolves, closer than they should have been. Then came another sound, distant, almost hidden beneath the wind, the unmistakable scrape of boots against rock. Someone else was out there, watching. The woman followed his gaze toward the darkness beyond the firelight. She pointed once, sharply, then toward his cabin. "Storm comes," she said. "Men come. If alone, you die." Lightning split the sky in the distance, thunder chasing it seconds later. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and iron. Elias looked again at the 3 women and noticed what fear had first hidden from him. One of them clutched her side, blood soaking through torn leather. Another had a deep cut across her arm, poorly bound. These were not hunters stalking prey. They were survivors running out of ground. His rifle felt suddenly heavy and useless in his hands. Elias swallowed and nodded once. He stepped aside and motioned toward the cabin. "Inside," he said, his voice rough. "Quick." The leader watched him for a long moment, measuring something deeper than his strength. Then she gave a single nod and moved past him, the others following close behind. As the door shut and the first drops of rain struck the roof like thrown gravel, Elias realized the truth of her words. By letting them stay, by sharing his shelter, he had chosen a side, and the night had only just begun. The cabin felt smaller the moment the 3 Apache women stepped inside, as if the walls themselves sensed the weight of what had just crossed the threshold. Elias barred the door with a heavy beam and fed another log into the fire. The flames leapt higher, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the rough wooden walls. Outside, the wind howled like something alive, and the rain began to fall harder, drumming against the roof in a relentless rhythm. The women did not sit at first. They spread out instinctively, one near the door, one by the single window, and the tallest, clearly the leader, standing directly across from Elias. Her eyes never left him. Slowly, carefully, he set his rifle against the wall to show he meant no harm. Only then did she relax her shoulders just slightly. She spoke again, quieter this time. "My name is Tala." She tapped her chest, then gestured to the others. "Nia, Shira." The 2 women nodded once, their expressions hard but not hostile. Up close, Elias could see the exhaustion etched into their faces. Dirt and dried blood clung to their skin, and their breathing was shallow, controlled as if each breath cost effort. Elias fetched his water jug and a small box of bandages. He hesitated, unsure if they would allow him to help. But Tala stepped forward and sat on the edge of the table without being asked. She pulled back the torn leather at her side, revealing a deep gash badly stitched with rough thread. "Fix," she said simply. As Elias worked, his hands trembling at first, Tala watched him closely, ready to strike if he tried anything foolish. But when he cleaned the wound gently and rewrapped it properly, something in her eyes shifted. Trust, small but real, began to form. Naya extended her arm next, the cut along it swollen and angry. Shira remained by the door, listening to the storm and whatever else moved beyond it. Between the crackle of the fire and the pounding rain, Tala spoke in short, careful sentences. They had been traveling with a wounded child from another tribe, she explained when a group of men began, tracking them, hunters who cared, more for bounties than lives. The child had been hidden safely in the hills, but the sisters had been forced to draw the pursuit away. They will not stop, Tala said. They come tonight. A sudden sound cut through the storm, a faint knock against the cabin wall. Not rain, not wind. Shira stiffened, her hand moving to the knife at her belt. Elias's stomach tightened. He realized then why Tala's words earlier had carried such force. You will sleep with me tonight had never meant closeness. It meant vigilance. It meant sharing the same danger, the same fire, the same fate. Elias took a deep breath and nodded toward the door. Then we stand together, he said. Tala met his gaze and inclined her head. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin, an unspoken bond had been sealed, one that would be tested. Before the night was over, the hours, before dawn stretched painfully slow, each minute weighed down by the sound of rain and the distant movement of men, circling in the dark. No one slept. The fire burned low, just enough to give light without giving away the cabin's position. Tala crouched beside Elias near the hearth, her breathing steady, her eyes sharp. Nia and Shira moved like shadows, trading silent signals, listening to the land as if it spoke directly to them. Then it came, the unmistakable crunch of boots on wet earth. Too deliberate to be the storm. A shape passed briefly across the window, blocking what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. Elias's mouth went dry. His fingers tightened around his rifle. Tala's hand closed around his wrist, firm and grounding. She leaned in close enough for him to hear her whisper. Wait. A second later, the door shuddered as something heavy struck it. Wood creaked, but the beam held. Shira moved first. She slipped the door open just enough to vanish into the rain, silent as breath. Almost immediately, a sharp cry cut through the night, followed by confusion and shouted orders. The attackers had expected a frightened farmer. They had not expected warriors. Gunfire erupted. Elias fired through the window at a moving shadow, the recoil jolting his shoulder. Nia burst out the back door, her massive frame disappearing into the darkness, her war cry swallowed by thunder. Tala stayed with Elias, directing him with sharp gestures, telling him when to shoot and when to wait. Every movement she made was precise, learned through years of survival. The fight was fast and brutal. One man fell near the porch, wounded and screaming. Another dropped his weapon and fled into the storm. When silence finally returned, it was broken only by the rain and the ragged breathing of those still standing. As dawn crept over the hills, the sisters regrouped near the cabin. Mud streaked their skin and fresh blood mixed with the old, but they were alive. Elias lowered his rifle, his hands shaking now that the danger had passed. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. Tala looked at him for a long moment, then placed her hand over her heart. Tonight, she said, you were not alone. Elias nodded, understanding at last. That night had not only saved lives, it had changed his own forever. Morning arrived slowly, pale light spilling across the wet earth as the storm finally loosened its grip on the land. Mist rose from the ground like drifting spirits, and the hills stood quiet, as if nothing violent had passed through them hours before. Elias stepped outside his cabin and breathed in the cold, clean air, still feeling the echo of gunfire in his bones. The land looked the same, but he knew it was not. Neither was he. The three Apache women stood a short distance away, washing blood and mud from their hands in the rainwater pooled near the rocks. In daylight, they seemed even more imposing, tall, powerful, unbroken. Yet there was something calmer in them now, a guarded ease that had not existed the night before. The danger had passed, at least for now. Tala approached Elias slowly. There was no command in her posture anymore, no urgency driving her steps. Men will not return, she said. They learned fear. She glanced toward the hills, then back at the cabin. But your life is changed. Elias gave a dry, thoughtful smile. Seems it already is. Word travels fast on the frontier, faster than hooves when fear is involved. Within days, passing traders and distant neighbors whispered about the lone farmer whose land had become untouchable, guarded by three Apache giants who answered no one. Trouble stopped coming down that stretch of land. Hunters chose other paths. Riders crossed themselves and kept moving. The sisters stayed longer than Elias expected. They repaired the fence, hunted the nearby ridges, and shared stories by the fire at night. Stories of loss, of exile, of strength demanded too early by the world. Elias listened more than he spoke. He learned that sometimes survival meant standing still and letting others stand with you. One evening, as the sun sank red behind the hills, Tala stood beside him at the edge of the field. "That night," she said quietly, "my words were sharp, but they saved us." Elias nodded. "They did." She met his eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. "In your tongue, words can confuse. In mine, they protect." As the wind moved through the tall grass and the fire crackled behind them, Elias understood the truth of the Wild West better than ever before. Legends were not born from conquest alone, but from the nights when strangers chose trust over fear and lived to see the dawn together.